We're going to learn how to use InDesign today. So we're going to try to recreate this ad. So I sent you guys a folder, or you can find it in Google Classroom, and it's called Elements. It's probably a zip file, but when you double click on that, it should open up a folder. And in that folder, you're going to see these butterflies. You're going to see this logo. You're going to see this picture. And there's going to be some text in there as well. There's also some fonts that you need to install on your computer. If you can't get these to install, don't worry about it. Just find fonts that are similar. But try to install these fonts. So just double click in here, and you're going to go to Zapfino and double click on that and hit install font. If you get this little window that pops up, just click on that and hit installed checked, and then you'll go into satisfaction. Might have to go through a couple folders, and you're going to install those, and then go into exported fonts and go to Bordeaux Roman and install that as well. So now if we were in person, we would measure this, and we would find out that this ad is 5 inches wide by 7 inches tall. So I'm going to go to InDesign, and I'm going to click on Create New. And I want to make sure that my units are in inches. And I'm going to type in 5 IN for my width. IN stands for inches. And I'm going to type in 7 IN for my height. I want to make sure that my orientation is on portrait. We're just doing one page layout. So just put in 1 for the pages, and then uncheck facing pages. We don't want this to be checked. If we had a multi-page layout, if that is unchecked, we're going to have individual pages. If that is checked, we're going to have pages next to each other like a book. So we're going to uncheck that. Then we're going to scroll down here to margins, and if you can't see it, just click on the little drop-down menu. Now looking at this, every page is going to have a margin. So looking at this, and if we had a ruler, we would be able to measure from the top of her head and the top of this butterfly and the top of this ascender. And then if we come over here and we measure from the top of this ascender and the S and the H in the logo and this text, and then this text here to the edge, this text here to the edge, we're going to see that there's about 1/4 of an inch margin. So we have to put 1/4 of an inch is 1/4. And so we have to put in a decimal point. If you don't know how to convert fractions to decimals, remember that line in between the numerator and the denominator is basically a division symbol. So you would just take your calculator and you would divide 1 by 4, and we would get 0.25 inches. Now as long as this little box is checked, it should, when I type in, like if I were to type in 0.5, it should type it into all of them. But we want to do 0.25 because that's what 1/4 of an inch is. Now if we wanted different dimensions for these margins, I could uncheck this and I could type in different dimensions here. We also, and that margin is a safe area. So if we look on this document, these are what we call trim lines. So you can see that there's like this white border around there, but that white border won't actually be there. We're going to cut it down to the edge of the document. That's called our trim size. And these little trim marks show us where to do that. That's how we knew what the size of the document was. The margin is like your safe area. So anything that's inside your margin we know is not going to get cut off when this gets trimmed down to its trim size. So that's why we have a margin. The bleed then, this document doesn't have a bleed on it, but what we would actually do is we would print this with a little bit of extra color, or the picture would go just a little bit farther, about 1/8 of an inch farther, or this blue would go about 1/8 of an inch farther off of the page. And what that allows the printer to do is it allows for error in printing so that it doesn't leave a little white edge right here when they trim it, because if it has a little white edge then it's imperfect, we have to throw it away, and that costs money. So most printed material. The standard bleed size is 1/8 of an inch. So again, that's 1/8. If you don't know what that is in decimal, you divide 1 by 8 and you'll get 0.125 inches. And we want that for the top, the bottom, the left, and the right bleed. When we do that and we hit create, this is what your document should look like. So the white edge is the edge of the page. The purplish pink line is your margin. That line won't print when we print these. And then the red line is the bleed. That's where the picture, it's going to extend beyond where we're actually going to trim it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I want to place this picture onto the page. So there's a couple different ways to do that. When we're in InDesign, we're placing objects. We're not opening things in InDesign. We are placing them. So I'm going to go to File, Place. I'm going to go to my Downloads. I'm going to go to that Elements folder. I'm going to find the picture of. So I want the Summer Bride picture, and I'm going to hit Open. Now, if I were to just click, you're going to see it's really big. It's gigantic, and it's probably fuzzy. You saw at first mine was fuzzy. If yours is fuzzy, go to View over Print Preview, and it should fix it. InDesign puts print previews in here. The file is not actually in there. It's a link. So it's kind of like Photoshop and your mockups, how some of your mockups had a smart object. So you would double click on the layer, it would open another file, you'd place your logo into that file, hit save, and then it would show up on your mockup. So it's similar here. The file's not really there, it's a link. So this is way too big, so I'm going to hit delete, and I'm going to do this in a different way. So just like you have pictures at home in frames, we put pictures in frames in InDesign. So right down here, it looks like a rectangle tool, but if I hold my mouse over it, it says rectangle frame tool. There's an X in the middle of it. That does have rectangle tools in here, but this one is our frame tool. So we're going to make a frame. If I were to measure this picture is 5 inches wide and 5 inches tall. So I need to make a frame that's 5 inches wide and 5 inches tall. So I'm going to click right here on the edge of my document. I'm just going to click once. And now I can show my options for the size of the frame that I want. So I want 5 IN for the width and 5 IN or inches for the height. And then I'm going to get this box that has an X through it. That's my frame. Now I'm going to place a picture into that frame. So I'm going to use my selection tool. So a lot of these tools you'll notice are similar to Illustrator. To select that box if it's not already. So I'm going to select it, and I know it's selected because I can see all these little anchor points around there. And I'm going to go to File, Place, because I'm going to place a picture in that frame. I'm going to go back to that Elements folder. I'm going to go to my picture of my bride, and I'm going to hit Open. Again, it's not going to fit in that frame. It's way, way big. If I zoom out and I use my direct selection tool to click the picture, this is the picture. This is the frame that the picture is in. So obviously the picture doesn't fit in that frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this. And if your right click is not activated on your computer, go to your system preferences down here in your dock, go to the mouse, and just change the right click on this to a secondary button, and that way you'll have your right click activated. So I'm going to right click on this picture, so make sure I'm using my selection tool to select it, right click, and I want to click on fitting. There's a lot of different options in here. I'm going to show you what they do. So I could center the content. It's already centered, so it didn't do anything. I'm going to go to fitting, fit content to frame, but if I do that, she squishes up really bad. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to undo that. I can go to fitting, fit frame to content, Now my frame's too big, so I don't want to do that. I'm going to go to fitting, and I'm going to do fit content proportionally. But if I do that, it's going to fit the whole picture in my frame. It's going to keep it in proportion, but then I have all this empty space in my frame, so I don't want to do that either. So the last option I have is right-click, fitting, fill frame proportionally. So now it's filling the frame, it's in proportion, but you'll notice she's not positioned properly. If we look at this picture, her hair doesn't get cut off. Her shoulder or her elbow gets cut off a little bit, but we do see and her hand or arm gets cut off, but we do see a little bit of her bracelet. So what we're going to do is, if I were to use my selection tool, I can move the frame around the page, but that's not what I want to do. I want to use my direct selection tool to click on the picture so I can move the picture around. If I don't want to move it up or down, I can hold Shift and I can drag it. Or I can use my arrow keys to nudge it. Shift will keep it from moving up and down, and I want to see her bracelet just a little bit. I want to see all of her hair, and her elbow is going to get cut off. So this looks pretty good. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just want to see that you have it positioned and fitted in that frame pretty well. So now what we're going to do is we are going to put in this blue box right here. So instead of using a frame, we're just going to use a shape tool. We're going to use the rectangle tool. And we don't need to know the exact size of it because we're just going from the bottom of the picture to the bottom of the page. So as I drag this, right now you can see I have no fill and no stroke on mine. Yours might be a little bit different. So I need to figure out what color that needs to be. So I have an instruction sheet right here that tells me that the color of this box needs to be a CMYK color. So cyan is 43%, magenta is 0, yellow is 12, and the black color or key color is 0, and there's no stroke on this. So this works very similarly to Illustrator. So I have a box there, but it has no color in it. So I can double click on my fill color, and here's where I can enter those CMYK values. So my cyan is 43, my magenta is 0, my yellow is 12, and the black is 0. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to fill it with that color. You can see that my stroke is none. If you need to change that, click here, and you can change the stroke to none. If you can't see this, go to Window, Control, so that you get that control panel that pops up for you. So you can change that to none. So this is kind of what we're looking at right now. Looks pretty good. If I need to move this, I can. I don't want it to cover the picture. I want it to butt right up to the bottom of the picture. Make sure it goes to the edges as well. All right, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start typing in this text. I will give you a little bit of a hint, and each one of these words is a separate text box, just so we have some ease in moving some stuff around. You will need to download or install that Zapfino font. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to use the type tool. The type tool works a little bit differently than Illustrator or Photoshop. When I'm in Illustrator, I can just click once, and same thing with Photoshop, and I can start typing. InDesign, I have to click and drag a text box. So I'm going to type out the word brides. I'm going to highlight it. And I'm going to go up here to my font, and I'm going to start typing in Zapfino. If you can't install Zapfino on your computer, just go to DaFont and find a font that looks similar. You might be able to find that on DaFont, but just find something similar, a nice script font. So I'm going to click on Brides, and the font size is going to be 25 points. If for some reason your text disappears in that text box and you get a little red box with a plus sign right here in the corner, that just means you have overset text. That means that text box is too small for the text. So I can just make that a little bit bigger until I see it. I'm going to pull this over into the document, and I'm going to try to figure out where it goes. It doesn't have to be in exactly the same spot, but if we look at the final ad, it looks like the descender is right on the margin, and then the word brides isn't too far from her head. And you can always position this a little bit differently later. You have to select the text box just like you do in Illustrator, and you can move it up and down with your arrow keys to nudge it just a little bit. So there's the word brides. The next is going to be love, and notice that it's all lowercase. So love. Zapfino. 25 points. It's already black, so I don't have to worry about that. And then if we look, it looks like the L kind of just goes right in front of the S, maybe about halfway up. So I'm going to take that and, I don't know, move that right about there. Doesn't have to be perfect. And don't let these text boxes get like gigantic because it will get a little overwhelming. Just kind of resize it so it kind of fits it. And then the next word is monarch with a capital M. So drag that out and type in monarch. Zapfino. 25 points. And if it hyphenates on you, again, my text box just isn't long enough. So drag that out, and then let's look at the ad. It looks like the H comes up to just above the top of the OV and the E, but the H doesn't go out past that margin. So I might move this stuff around just a little bit, just to make it a little bit tighter. I don't want the E and the H. I don't want the E and the H to overlap. There is some space between that. And then we're going to do the word flowers, which is the last word on there. And change that to Zapfino. And change that to 25 points. And then I'm just going to reduce the size of that text box a little bit. And then flowers, it looks like the S goes right on the margin, and the L is kind of like right under the C. So we'll put that over here. We'll get that S on the margin. Somewhere right in there. It doesn't have to be perfect, just as long as it's kind of placed in there. Looks about right. Might be a little bit bigger than that, but that's fine. Looks good. All right. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to place these little butterflies. Now, let me undo that. So these butterflies are in that Elements folder. So I'm going to go to File, Place. We always want to place. We don't want to copy and paste stuff in Illustrator because they have to be links, kind of like those smart objects. And if you copy and paste, it doesn't know where the other file is and it won't print properly. So if we go to that Elements folder, here is that butterfly one. Now, I'll give you a little hint. We don't have to really like resize this. It's not a gigantic file. So I'm just going to click once to place it. I'm going to use my selection tool to move it over here. We'll look at the ad, and it looks like that top butterfly is right on the margin, and then that bottom butterfly, it's on her arm, but just above her bouquet. So I'm going to move these butterflies up, and it looks like this file is a little large, so I'm going to use my direct selection tool to click on the picture. I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to resize this because remember that bottom butterfly should be up like on her arm but not on the bouquet, and I'm going to move it over to the right because I don't want those butterflies like right in her face. So that looks about right, but the butterflies are orange. If we look at this, they need to be blue. So if we look at the instruction sheet, it says that they need to be Pantone 3105. So again, Pantone colors are they're called spot colors. Pantone is a brand, and it's usually a color that can't be represented or can't be recreated with CMYK. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Window, Links. So kind of like Smart Objects, we have links in here. So there's the bride picture that I've already placed, and then there's my monarch butterfly. The text doesn't show up because we typed the text directly in InDesign, and the same thing with the box. It's not a link, it's not a different file. We created that in InDesign. But I need to modify these butterflies, and I can't modify like photos and illustrations in Photoshop or in InDesign. I have to modify, if it's a photo, I gotta modify it in Photoshop. If it's an illustration, I have to modify that in Illustrator. So I'm looking at this file and it says it's an EPS file. And looks like it's probably an illustration, not a photo. So I'm gonna right click on that link. I'm gonna do Edit With, because I'm gonna edit it. And it gives me the options of Illustrator or Photoshop. More than likely, because it's an EPS and because it's an illustration, I'm going to use my best guess and say, okay, I need to open this in Illustrator. So I'm going to open this in Illustrator, and it's going to open Illustrator up for you, and you should see the butterflies in here. They're all individual butterflies, so just click and drag to select all of them. We'll change them all at the same time. So Pantone colors are in a little different spot. So you can see I've got like my color here, or if I were to double click on here, I can't choose Pantone colors here. I have to go to Window, Swatches, and then there's this little library right here. And if I go to Color Books, here are all my Pantone colors. But I will give you a hint, it's already saved in here for you. So this Pantone color right here, so if we hover our mouse, it tells us that it's Pantone 3105M. It also has a little dot in the corner which tells me it's a spot color. So I'm just going to change the color of my butterflies here, and then I have to save it. So I have to go to File, Save, and then I go back to InDesign, and it should change it. If it doesn't, let me see if I can make it do it on purpose. So let's see if I undo that and I save it again. And I go back to InDesign. Notice that they got kind of fuzzy, and notice there's this like exclamation point in a yellow triangle. And if I look in my links panel, you can see that it has the same thing. What this is telling me is something changed in the link. The file got changed, but it didn't automatically update. So to update it, I just double click on that exclamation point, and now they're orange again. I don't want them orange, I want them to be blue. I'm going to save that. If you get this, you can hit Don't Show Again if you'd like. It's just an old file, so it's saving it in a different format. And if I go back to InDesign, again, it didn't update the link automatically. So just double click on the exclamation point and it will update for you. Okay. So now they're positioned properly. They're the blue color that we're looking for. So the next thing that I'm going to do is place this logo in here. So notice on the big ad, so it looks like it's right on the margin, but notice that this picture also kind of has a margin too. So if we were to measure this, this would be about 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go to File, Place. I'm going to get that logo and I'm going to hit Open. So we're just placing it. Oh, okay. So you just saw what happened. I just made a happy little mistake. This is a teaching moment here. So I had my butterflies selected. I had that frame selected when I placed this in there, so it placed it inside, it replaced it with the logo. So I'm just going to undo that, and then you'll see I have this here, so I can just click out here on the outside of this. So if you do click on a different frame, it will place it in that frame. So I always try to place things out here in my scratch area and then pull them into the document. I don't want to resize this because my instructions don't say to resize it, it just says place. So I'm not resizing this at all. So I'm going to put this over here. And like we said, that H is probably just about on that margin, but where do I put it? Up and down, right? Like I'm not sure exactly where 1/4 of an inch is. So if you look over here and up at the top, you have rulers. And I know that this is 1/4 of an inch because in the past we've measured this with rulers, and it's 1/4 an inch from the bottom of the picture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these rulers to my benefit. If it's not in inches, right click in the ruler and make sure it says inches. And you have to do the same thing over here. Right click inside the ruler and make sure it says inches, because that's what we're measuring this in. So notice where it says 0, that's the top of my document. And where it's 0 here, that's the edge of my document. I can change where that 0 is, because if I look, here's 5, right? If I look over here, there's kind of like a little line when I put my cursor there. So I could measure up 1/4 of an inch, which is going to be right about here. So I'm using that ruler to my benefit, and I can create what's called a guide. So if I click in the ruler up here at the top, I'm going to do a left click, not a right click. And I drag down. See that little blue line? I'm going to drag that down. I'm going to look over here. So here's my 5-inch mark. That's the bottom of my picture. I want to go up 1/4 of an inch. So remember, 1/4 of an inch is, if I look at this, between my 4 and my 5, here's my halfway mark. Here's 1/4. It's actually 3/4, but it's 1/4 of an inch from the bottom. So I'm going to drop that guide right there. That guide will not print. So I'm going to click on my Monarch logo, and I'm going to use my arrow keys to put the word Monarch right on top of that guide. So now I should be about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom. I should be 1/4 of an inch from the side. So it looks like it's about in the right spot. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect. We're just looking that it's placed in about the right place. All right, then we have some text down here. So we're going to set this text, because on the instruction sheet it says that we're going to set this. So we're going to type it out ourselves. This text has already been typed out for us. I'll show you how to place that here in just a minute. So we're going to type out. We're going to take that type tool and we're going to drag out a text box. And I know that might be a little hard for you guys to read because it is a script font. It says the first date, period, and then there's a space, your bridal shower, period, and then there's a space, a fairy tale wedding, and then there's a period. So the first date, period. Make sure the is capitalized, then space, your bridal shower, period, your bridal shower, period. Make sure your is capitalized, space, a fairy tale wedding. A fairy tale, and fairy tale is 2 words. Wedding, and make sure everything's spelled correctly. If you want, you can go up to edit, spelling, check spelling. This is in all the software. So if you go under edit, spelling, check spelling, it will do a spell check for you.